Welcome to the Vine Resources Podcast Show with your host, David Lawrence.
Welcome to another edition of the Vine Resources Podcast Show. I'm delighted to have with us today Ali Niknam. Ali is the CEO of bunq over in the Netherlands. Ali, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Exciting times.
Ali, I would love you to share with our listeners a little bit more about bunq, the company, and about yourself. Can you give us a bit of an introduction of who you are?
Yeah, sure. I guess I like to describe myself as a coder, since I have a bit of a broad background. I was born in Canada, and then we moved to Iran when I was about 1, lived there for about 6 years, then moved to the Netherlands. So I'm truly, and I feel like a global citizen. I really love the world as a whole. And I've been around to enjoy quite numerous different aspects of it, I guess. And, at a young age, I got interested in coding. So I started coding at 9. I started investing in stocks at 12. And I founded my first company at 16. So yeah, I guess I'm an early bird.
Fantastic. And tell us a little bit about the company. Tell us a bit about what you're doing at bunq.
Yeah, so to tell about bunq, I have to tell you about TransIP, which is one of my other companies. I founded TransIP during my university years, and it's a company that does web hosting and domain names. It's a cloud, infrastructure company, and it became very successful actually in just a couple of years. And as it grew and as it became more successful, I came to the conclusion that we had so much talent aboard that they could probably do a better job than I could. And so I stepped aside for them to flourish further. And then I had all this time on my hands to, basically figure out what to do next. At the time I was, I believe, 28 or 29. And it seemed a bit too early for me to, start with my pension plans. So... or buy a boat, or do whatever it is people do. So I started figuring on what to do next, and it had been a lifelong dream of mine to write a book, and so I did. It was a very interesting experience. It actually got accepted and published, so that was a highlight, I guess, of my life. It's only in Dutch, so I guess your listeners won't be super interested in it. But anyway, and as I was writing the book, I came to the conclusion that what I really love to do is building products. I really love creating new stuff. And I also concluded that I really like to do something that, has a social impact. And so I consider doing all kinds of things with, the climate catastrophe that is going on right now, or, fresh water supplies, or a million ideas came to mind. And as I was thinking it over, the financial crisis, of course, was happening, and it turned really grim. And I saw a lot of people being hurt by it. And then I saw a lot of people attempting to solve it by shouting at each other, which didn't seem very constructive to me. And so some things came together for me, and I figured, hey, the bank of the future is going to be tech anyway. I mean, who's going to do paperwork? And, I think I'm quite good at tech. And I saw the social impact of a failing bank system, so I figured, let's show that we can also solve the problem by creating a bank that is different from all the traditional banks out there. And so this was the inception of bunq, based on a very simple idea that if you would merge tech with banking, you could come up with a sector that is more inclined to be user-oriented and that is more diverse than the sector used to be. Mm-hmm. And so we started bunq.
Fantastic. And by the way, just going back to the book, I'm looking forward to the publication in English. You've got a huge world market out there, and you might be surprised. There might be some good Dutch listeners who will be interested. Tell us a little bit about and again about just going back to the business a second. So you operating for both consumers and business, and also you have a service, what I would say, for expats. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So bunq is what we like to call world-class mobile banking. So we put all the features you would need into a mobile banking app. You never need to visit the bank branch. No paperwork is required. You can sign up in 5 minutes. And because of that, because it's just so easy to use and the app is just a really wonderful experience, we have noticed that there are a couple of groups that are really interested in our services. One of them is obviously expats. I mean, they just need a bank account as they move to the Netherlands, or some of them, they just need to have a euro bank account. Keep in mind, bunq is a full bank. We're not like a light bank or a whatever bank. We're a full bank. We have a full banking permit. All deposits are fully insured. So especially for expats, it's very nice because you can sign up for a euro bank account by just using your mobile phone from your home country. So you can set it all up even before you visit whatever country you're going to visit. And it doesn't require any paperwork, and it actually doesn't require something that is called a BSN in Dutch, which is your tax identity number in the Netherlands. And I've noticed that many people who come to work here, for them it's a relief because you only get your BSN after some weeks, but you already need a bank account for, you know, your rent and for your employer, and we're a great solution for that.
That's fantastic. That's really good. Tell me about if I want to set up a banking license in the Netherlands. How hard was it? Was it easy? Was it difficult? Is there a story there?
Well, let me put it this way. I love a challenge, but if you would ask me, you know, is the good idea, I would be strongly opposed. I would be strongly opposed to anyone asking a banking permit because, you know, especially for entrepreneurs, for people who have fresh ideas or ideas on how things can be different, that's kind of exactly the opposite of what all the rules and regulations lead to. So it was quite a ride. In fact, you know, at the time that we got our banking permit, we were the first to get a new greenfield banking permit in 35 years. And I can promise you 35 years ago, there were a lot less rules and regulations. So it has been very difficult. At the same time, the supervisors are aware that, you know, something needs to happen and that diversity is something to embrace. So, you know, the intention is there. It's just very difficult.
Understood. Maybe a future maybe a future book, I should say, but...
Perhaps. Well, actually, there has been a book written about bunq because it was such a special occasion to get that banking permit, and it's called it is actually in English. It's called Breakthrough Banking, and you can order it online. Fantastic, nice pitch there as well. Ali, tell me, you're about 100 employees now in the Netherlands. Tell me what a typical day though looks like in the business for you today. Yes. So one of the things that generally in all my businesses I love to do is automation. So the fact that we're 100 people doesn't necessarily reflect our true size. We really love making our products so good that people can be fully empowered to do whatever it is they want by themselves. That being said, a typical day for me looks like I wake up at around 7:30 to 8ish. Then I go through all my mail that has been piled up somehow. I don't know where all this mail and stuff comes from. I check some numbers, I check my mail. Then I do my morning rounds of meetings that I have and my calls. I really love being involved with the product, so I think I spend most of my time looking at the design of new stuff that's coming out. I look at code of new stuff that's going out. I talk to our product people of stuff we're developing. I think that's probably 50 to 60% of my time. And then I deal with all the other stuff that as a typical CEO you need to do, such as this interview. And, you know, sometimes if I'm lucky, I have some time to do some coding myself, because I'm a techie, and I love being involved in tech. And I don't know, in a blink of an eye, it's like 11 p.m. again.
It's a long day. And just out of interest, I didn't check, and sorry, I should have beforehand. But do you have a community like app where your community gives feedback on the product development roadmap or anything like that?
Yes, we actually have a very, very strong community that is very much engaged with bunq and with all we do. So yes, we do have a community.
Fantastic, great. Tell me this. What about? I just wanted to know for yourself. Perhaps who's been had an impact on you as a leader? So perhaps anyone who's been a mentor for you, and how's that impacted your journey?
I think one of the things that have been very much exciting along this path is just the randomness at which I've met people that have meant so much in my life. Even when we just came to the Netherlands, that's maybe a bit too specific or too detailed, but you know, back then the policy of the municipality was to put basically all foreign people in the same school. And for me, that was like completely across the city. As a small kid, this was an issue. And just by sheer luck, my mother figured out that there was a school nearby. And so she asked them, hey, is it okay if my kid, you know, comes here? Because this school is 400 meters away from our house, and the other he needs to go by car every day, and it doesn't make sense. And then they asked the school teacher, his name was Meester Jan, as it's pronounced in Dutch, if he would be okay of having me. And he said, yes, well, I would love to have him, because indeed it doesn't make sense for this poor kid to go all across town. And this school was just so different from that international school I was placed at, and the level was a lot higher. And I think Meester Jan is probably one of the people that clearly defined my life, just by an act of both logic and kindness at the same time.
That's nice.
So he was one of them. But even since then, of course, I'm older than I like to admit. Time goes fast. I've met so many people that have been very inspiring to me, from colleagues that do things in a certain way, to just meetings with old gray-haired people that have been around, you know, and have a story to tell. Now, if you ask me, do I have like one particular person who is my mentor or who is someone I look up to, then the answer to that is no, because, you know, I think I have yet to meet a person who is not capable of delivering something that is of true value and very special to me. So I think everybody has something interesting to share.
Tell me a little bit about employee engagement at your company. How do you keep your employees engaged from the top?
Well, I think many things are important to have that. First of all, our purpose is very true and it's very important. We're not just here to make money or be commercially successful. Obviously, we're a commercial company, so we need to make profit sooner or later, but that's not the reason why this company was founded, nor is it the reason why people are here. Then secondly, we try to have a culture and a structure where people get their own ownership of whatever subject they are comfortable with. And on that subject, they have the end say of things. So that means that you actually get to influence the course of the company, and having that ability to influence the course of this company is, of course, very motivational. And I think, thirdly, culturally, we try to be, and this is perhaps very Dutch, and the Dutch are as we discussed before this interview, maybe a bit different from many other cultures. We are very direct, we are very apolitical, and we are very flat organized. So culturally, we try to nourish a culture where everybody's focused on, the work, on objective output, on getting the best work they can. And we don't care about whether you're young or old or a male or a female or, Dutch or British or American. It's all good as long as your work is good. We are very much focused on that work. And I think those three things together make our culture very strong and very effective.
What do you think is the biggest challenge facing business leaders today?
Oh, there are so many. I mean, running a business in general today is very complicated, as we have strong competition from the US, of course, in most fields, where people are more advanced in many regards. Obviously, I'm talking about Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon. Huge companies with near infinite resources and a very strong home market, giving them a huge advantage over anything we are doing here in Europe, which kind of hurts me, because I think, it hurts me is not the right word, it pains me to see, let me put it that way, because I see that in Europe we have a lot of talent. We have a lot of talent here, and we seem to be losing out to the big four, so to say, due to reasons that we have created ourselves, which is a shame. So anyway, as a business leader here in Europe, then you focus very strong overseas competition based on depending on what market you're operating in. That's one. Secondly, I think back in the old days, things were maybe a bit easier. The world was a smaller place. You could motivate people by just giving them bonuses and money. And all these rules are changing because the world is changing. And so as a business leader, you need to keep up with these changes to remain relevant and effective. And I think, thirdly, it's also challenging as a business leader to weigh in all the things that you need to weigh in these days to be a good business leader, meaning you can't just go for profit. It's also about, sustainability. It's about employee welfare. It's about your customers or users that you need to embrace. It's about so many more things than just hitting your revenue targets every month. And just balancing out these things with each other by itself is a challenge.
You mentioned there about the US, obviously, but if you look at the business in the banking industry, that's a huge opportunity for Europe as well in terms of the business that you're doing. And, they're quite far behind in that market, aren't they?
Well, yes and no. So I think the US is very inspiring because what those guys seem to do, and mobile phones are an example there, is it appears as if they are behind, but then they wake up, they see the gap, they identify how to play catch up, and they bunny hop over Europe because they just have both the economic as well as the technological muscle to pull it off. I think the iPhone celebrates its 11th birthday today. 12 years ago, Siemens, Ericsson, all of those companies were by and large world leaders in that field, and they just got destroyed. So, yes, they may appear to be behind, but they still have a single market, a uniform market. They have the same language, they have the same currency, they have the same sets of regulations, and this is a huge advantage over Europe.
Some great points there. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received, Ali?
As a entrepreneur and as a business leader, obviously you face challenges every day and you try to overcome them. And sometimes, you always need to, make it work, right? And sometimes this can be very difficult. And sometimes you might consider doing things that you would ordinarily not do. I don't mean negative things, but, things that that don't match. For instance, me as a coder, I would be inclined to solve most issues by automating stuff. Now, it might be that due to particular business circumstances, it might be more economically more viable to, for instance, not automate stuff away, but rather outsource a certain issue to some company to solve it that way. Or, whatever other issue you might face. And it is easy to lose yourself. And I think one of the best advices I had was some years ago when I was in the fortunate position to hear Kofi Annan speak in a very small setting. That guy was absolutely amazing, by the way. And it related to something else, but he said something like, stay true to yourself. And so whenever I'm having a hard time and I don't know what to do anymore, I recall that moment and I take a deep breath and let's imagine it's not 1 a.m. and I haven't worked 17 hours straight. If this was the, optimistic, fresh, creative me, what would I do then? How would I solve this issue? And then I try to do the best I can.
Fantastic. Great story. What does diversity and inclusion mean for you?
Well, that's really interesting because I was just discussing this particular matter some days ago with a friend of mine. And with my background of tech, I don't know if you remember bulletin boards like BBSs where you used to dial in and, exchange messages. I'm from that background. And, what I learned from back then is to appreciate and value people's ideas based on what they do, right? When you were exchanging messages back then, you never knew whether the other person was a guy or a girl or nearby or far away or, young or old. You just valued their opinion or their information that they shared. And I think there's a strong culture in tech to, at least the original tech before it became mainstream, to really value people based on what they have to say. And so this fits in with the culture of, appreciating people's output at bunq. And so I think we embrace and we appreciate output, and we, if you look at bunq, sometimes you have a young person of 23 overlooking an older person of 40 or 50. Sometimes you see a girl in the top, sometimes you see a guy, sometimes you see a Dutch person, sometimes you see a Russian person. I think because of our focus on objective output and work, diversity comes natural, and we logically get the best person for the job instead of some kind of dogmatic view of what that person should look like. If that makes sense. I don't know.
What do you think the business and industry is going to look like, your business and your industry is going to look like in 5 years' time?
Completely different than today. Yes. But I guess that's not the answer you're looking for.
Well, I'm just curious, what if you crystal ball to 2024, what do you think's what's coming up?
Well, it hugely depends on regulation. So if we get true is maybe too much, but if we get in the opportunity to have a bit more competition in the market. I mean, for instance, in the Netherlands, we have a lot of lock-in with existing banks because people can't switch, because if they have a mortgage with a bank, they are required to stay at that bank. Or, if you have the European system of IBANs, like, there's the IBAN and you can't transfer that IBAN like you can with a normal phone number. And a lot of regulation, of course, also favors the incumbents. So if only a couple of those things that are prohibiting competition get removed, then I think in 5 years' time, we will have an industry that is a lot more diverse, a lot more customer-centric, delivering a lot more products that people actually want to have and are happy with, and also a lot less players, because I believe in Europe today there are 4,000 to 5,000 banks. If this was an unregulated industry, they would not exist anymore today.
And it was interesting you mentioned about mortgages and with your bank, and I believe, being from the UK, I mean that's seen as anti-competitive to be able to be told. But like the mobile networks, that's going to change.
I hope so.
If you had your time again, and you were giving your 20-year-old self advice, what's the one thing that you'd say?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think I would say two things. So I had an accident some years ago. It was just an unfortunate combination of events. And it kind of impacted my health. So I would say, don't go to that particular place at that time, because you will suffer for it for 5 years to come. Maybe 6. So that's one. And the second thing I would say is, don't start a bank.
Well, our viewers can't see this, but you haven't got any grey hairs from what I can see, so you can't be doing too bad.
No, I actually do have all the grey hairs, and they're all because of this venture. So, it's so difficult trying to change the world for the better in a regulated industry. It's already complicated to, be a startup and compete with incumbents in an unregulated industry. But in a regulated industry where the regulation favors the incumbents, it's near impossible. And so, I would advise myself, think twice. Go do something else that's important. I think, averting the climate catastrophe is even easier than this stuff. So go do that.
Ali, thanks so much for joining us. Ali, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, find out more about the company, how can they do that?
I think the best way to do it is just go to the App Store and download bunq. That's BUNQ. It's point symmetric, by the way. That's why it's bunq. So, well, anyway, I'm digressing. But so download bunq. Sign up for it. It only takes you 5 minutes. Get to experience what it's like. And, if you're happy, share it with your friends.
Thank you. And just for that point on the expat, can I download it in another country? Is it on the global Apple store?
Yes, you can, both on Play Store as well as App Store, across Europe and across US. I believe we haven't unlocked all the countries, but most countries it should be available. And especially for expats, I've heard great stories and great feedback about it. So give it a try.
I can see that. Ali, thanks so much for joining us. Best of luck for the rest of the year.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
We really hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're listening to this on iTunes, please take a moment to give us a review. 4 stars would be good, but 5 stars would be amazing.